for bringing us our second last panel of Ausbanking 2025. It brings us to the final session. Now, of course, some people can think it's been a long couple of days. We've crammed a lot into the suitcase. These guys are raring to go to talk to us on the topic of disruption from an explosion of the communication channels. So as they come to the stage, I want you to give them everything you've got by banging the happy sticks together. Mr. Music, if you've got a bit of an upbeat tune you can play for us, pump it in there. Here we go. Disruption from an explosion of communication channels. Sally Cray is the Chief Communications Officer of the RBA. Megan Landauro is the External Affairs Lead for ING. Tony Mitchelmore is the Managing Director of Visibility. And Emily Gatt, the General Manager of Corporate Affairs for Westpac. Take it away.
Welcome everyone. Now,
I feel like a bridesmaid or something.
I know. I was going to say that it's really hard to be at the end of a two-day conference and that we have clearly saved the best till last. But now that I know we're second last, Adam, I can't really use that line, can I? But I'm going to do it anyway. But fantastic to be with you all here today. And I know you've been talking a lot about disruption. We want to have a bit of fun with it. Disruption, as we know, is the defining theme of our time, whether it's disruption due to economic volatility, to digital disruption, to shifts in the regulatory landscape, to geopolitics. It is happening all around us. But in corporate affairs and in research and communication and the line of the work that we're in, we are not just watching it happen. We're having to operate in real time to figure out how we're going to land and craft messages with audiences who are increasingly skeptical and increasingly distracted. So delighted to be here with our esteemed panel this afternoon to dig a bit deeper into this issue. But before we get into the detail, I want to start with a quick rapid fire question to my esteemed panel. What is your go-to when you wake up in the morning, media-wise? Rapid fire, Tony, go.
Daily Telegraph Sport.
Really?
Yes.
I was expecting something much more sophisticated from you, Tony.
No.
But I love that you've been honest and open in your question.
It's too early in the morning to get into politics or what's happening in the world. There's enough bad news.
Megan, what about you?
Look, I won't lie, the AFR, the Oz, some of the, the usual suspects. But then I also love to consume what my customers are consuming. So I love the quickie, I love a bit of Instagram, a bit of TikTok, whatever I can get a good dose of.
I read the paper before I go to bed, papers, but I am a horrible political hack who still listens to Radio National and AM. And I'm so embarrassed. I'm not 80, but that's a terrible habit that you get after you've been in politics that you can't shake, sadly.
Oh, don't worry, Sal. There's a few of us on the panel that also listen to RN in the morning. But
I always say to my team, oh, Sally Sarah's saying this, and they're like, who?
Who's Sally Sarah?
And they're like, you're the only one listening, so who cares?
But Megan, great to see we've got a bit of Insta and TikTok here, because at least it shows that if we had a different group up here, maybe Megan, people more like your age, we'd probably get some very different answers as well. Don't take that personally, Tony and Sal, I'm in your league. So Sal, I'm going to kick off with a question for you about disruption. It's been a huge year for you, a huge year for the RBA governor. Michelle Bullock is probably the most public and prominent official outside of government. You're running a press conference after every meeting. You're under intense scrutiny. I'm really keen for you to share with us how you communicate in a way that gets cut through with every generation on a topic that is so important and of great interest to everyone across the country.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. The RBA has actually just learnt that they need to speak to the public, so we're really starting from a low base here. So we haven't quite jumped ahead to all of those different age groups, but there has been a real change at the RBA. I've been there now for 18 months, and it was a big jump for them to step into speaking directly to the public, having to change the way they write their material and make it, more broad and more accessible. So it has been a real change. We're now moving into looking at things like social media. We have a lot of conversations with our fellow central banks, and a lot of Asian central banks are actually incredibly adept at social media and use influencers, etc., for their governor to speak to after their press conferences. So they're way ahead of us in terms of reaching, those populations that are so heavily into social media in those Asian countries. We're starting to do some research with the public, which again is something that the RBA didn't do before, but that a lot of other central banks do, and that's really helping us understand, who we need to target, who is actually listening to things that matter to us about the economy, who cares about the economy, who wants to learn more about monetary policy and how it affects their lives. So we'll be reaching into certain cohorts and certain groups of people in a more targeted way because of that research. So it's been a really interesting journey. But yes, the press conference is I think the governor would be very surprised to hear you say that she's one of the most number one people in Australia after a government official, much to her disgust, I think. We were actually just talking today about how she had a conversation with other central bank governors this week at the G20, and they were all saying, yeah, why do you get so much coverage in Australia? She's there, none of them get as much coverage as we do. So I guess the AFR wouldn't be able to publish a book if it didn't have enough of us in it. So we're very happy to oblige.
Oh, she gets cut through. When my 83-year-old mother's talking about Michelle Bullock and how well she's doing, she's getting cut through. And Sal, just taking a step back, it's great to hear that you're thinking about how you segment your audiences and target them, but take a step back to traditional media reporting, and how do you rate their reporting of the RBA this year? You clearly received quite a bit of feedback after the last RBA meeting, but as my boss always says to me, feedback is a gift.
Yeah. That's such a great Westpac term.
How did you take that gift, Sal?
Places. Oh well, we welcome all feedback, but we do. I think something that again that's been something that hasn't been done at the RBA before. I often say that I heard John Kunkel talk about the Defence Department. I talk about the Defence Department in that that's what the RBA Comms Department used to be, which is where all good media inquiries used to go to die. So we actually now engage with the media and we talk to them often. We have a small media team, 3 people, and they're constantly engaging. So we do push back a bit now, or we invite people to perhaps look at our forecasts. But it's a different relationship, and it is much easier. The governor has met with a lot of journos, and I know this is very old school, but it is harder to punch someone in the face if you've actually sat down and had a cup of tea with them. So it does actually still work. Having those relationships, and the traditional media does still drive a lot of the coverage. The radios rip and read the papers, the TVs cover what's on the morning radio. So it is all a bit, still quite cyclical. So it is still important, but that's probably talking to 10% of the population, that sort of circle. So you do really have to reach out, and we absolutely understand that, and that's our next phase of our evolution. As the governor says, it's an evolution, not a revolution. So slow and steady at the RBA.
Oh, I love it. And Tony, I wouldn't mind shifting to you and just some reflections on the election campaign earlier this year. A lot was made of political leaders during the campaign, using influencers and podcasts and all sorts of socials and TikTok. In the polling that you've been doing, what impact did it have, and did it really help them to get cut through to those different audience segments that Sal was saying the RBA is now looking at targeting?
Yeah, for sure. But you can get carried away with this. It is just, in the modern world, it is just incredibly hard to cut through. It's not just, you just have to use every single possible channel available to you, and you'd be mad not to. Otherwise, you just won't reach people. So that's just the way of modern media. But you can get carried away with it because, yes, you have to reach people, but you need a story to tell. It's kind of like, if you're relying on those sorts of influencers and you're relying on those sorts of channels to reach people, it's kind of like relying on the tail to wag the dog. Labor had a better story to tell. They got momentum. That was definitely helped by, there were some fundamentals behind that which were much stronger than the actual channels that they were using. But you have to use those channels.
Yeah, but the content is key. If you don't have the content right, then it doesn't matter which channel you use.
Yeah, and in a corporate world, brand is key.
Yeah.
There used to be a saying 15, 20 years ago that you've got to live the brand. And I just think that's more true than ever. You just have to live the brand. You cannot fake it. People aren't just media savvy, they're strategy savvy. And they are really well aware of vested interests, and they can pick it in a second. So in a focus group, we can show them a political ad, and they cannot tell you what is happening in Canberra or Macquarie Street. And it could be the biggest scandals are happening or the biggest issues that are happening. They will not be able to tell you what is happening. They just do not tune into it. But then you can show them a political ad or a clip from the news of a politician speaking, and they can get it absolutely right. They will tell you what the vested interest was, what the strategy was, what he's trying to do, how he's trying to position the opposition. They are really incredibly strategy savvy, not just media savvy. So, you know, that leaving the brand, and I guess authenticity is the word that get used a lot, is still really important. And, you know, those fundamentals are, you know, one side of the story. The other side of the story is then, if you've got that right, how do you actually reach people these days, and how do you engage them and cut through? So those influences and all those things are really important.
And I think your point about the rhetoric needing to match the reality is so incredibly important as well, because, you know, your brand is your business, your people are your brand, and they need to be speaking in a way that you said that is genuine and authentic. But if we take a leaf out of the politicians' books, do you think more corporate leaders should be communicating in this way and exploring, you know, these new channels and ways of working? I know some are, but not all.
If you want your message out there, I think it may not be appropriate to what you've got to say, and, you know, I could imagine there'd be certain avenues that the RBA would not use.
No
The governor on TikTok, Sal?
No TikTok for us.
No TikTok?
TikTok on RBA
that's a
phones.
shame.
No.
Maybe one day.
I think Labor used Batuta Advocate people,
Yeah,
didn't
they did. They employed Batuta Advocate boys to run their podcast strategy during their campaign, which was really successful.
Yeah.
So the RBA might not do that.
No, but I think we won't do that.
But
we are talking about, you know, talking to financial influencers. Even in Australia, there, you know, some of those, especially female finance websites. I know you would know those, Megan. They have huge followings. You know, and having an interview with, you know, their team talking to the governor, it's much more informative and much less gotcha, and more interesting, you know, for the people who are tuned into that particular site. So influencers definitely
they're getting great cut through.
Yeah.
So Megan, turning to you, do you think at ING your execs are going to be speaking more to the Abby Chatfields of the world rather than the Chanticleers?
Yeah, well, she did come up on my Instagram feed this morning. She's having a great time in Greece with her Peking duck boyfriend, in case anyone wants to know.
Lucky Abby, my heart bleeds.
But look, you know, I think you've both kind of covered it already, but really from where I sit, if you want to be, you know, influencing your customers and helping to shape the public narrative, you've really got to be engaging with both influencers and the media. I did look up some stats. So today, 1 in 4 Australians are consuming their news through social media. About 57% of those who are aged 18 to 30 have actually been influenced to purchase or try a product or service because they've seen an influencer using it. However, on the flip side of that, when it comes to where people think misinformation is coming from, influencers are like one of the major sources, so that can't be ignored. And I think that's where media also plays a role. So over the last 10 years, trust in media has actually been pretty resilient. And in the last year, I think it's notched up about 3%. And when you look at where customers or consumers or everyday Aussies are going to fact check their news, it's the traditional news sources. So, you know, from my point of view, I think you've definitely got to be doing both.
And keen to understand, obviously ING's built up quite a reputation for itself as a challenger brand in this country, but how do you tackle that and navigate it with the rise of, you know, the fintechs and all the other companies that are coming up now? Do you think you can still maintain that presence and that reputation as a challenger brand, or does the brand evolve?
Yeah, I would say that the playing field has definitely changed. You know, we've been here for 25 years now. I would say that we're no longer only competing with the majors, we're competing with others as well. And the media landscape has obviously massively evolved. But at ING, you know, we still kind of, we anchor our brand in a challenger philosophy. And that's very much anchored to doing things differently, being relevant, and, doing things differently, being relevant, and keeping things simple. And that philosophy has really served us very well. And, you know, when you look at our business strategy for the projected future, it's very much anchored in that as well. And, you know, today we've got more than 2.3 million customers. We're Australia's most recommended bank. And I think it will continue to serve us well for years to come.
Thank you. Yeah. Sal, I just want to turn to you next and dive a bit deeper into misinformation, which we've touched on briefly. As I'm sure many in the audience know, you were Principal Private Secretary to Turnbull. Keen to get your views
That's
about...
not the lady that made the tea, just in case you were wondering.
Although if you did make a cup of tea, I'm sure you would have been
I
brilliant
didn't
at
mind.
it.
I did all things.
But between now and then, Sal, what's changed in the way that media covers the economy and politics? How have you seen that evolve since your time in politics?
Well, it's just so fast now. I mean, a story doesn't even last a cycle. You know, I mean, there's just so much news and posting online constantly. I mean, I don't know how journalists do it now. They must be, you know,
Never ending,
it's
isn't
not
it?
just the morning and then the afternoon and the night. You've got to sort of post continuously. So it is just so quick and they are just so busy. So trying to get their attention and for them to get the facts right, you know, has become even harder, especially with the stuff at the RBA. I mean, it's not easy material that we're asking, you know, people to, you know, to digest and to report on. So, you know, you've got to change the way that you know, deliver the news to them. You've got to do lockups, you've got to give them access to people, you've got to give them briefings. I mean, there's a lot more of that, I think, that goes on at government now than it did when I started, and certainly also at the RBA we invite people in to, you know, to really have deep dives to understand it, because it's impossible, you know, for them to punch out a story, you know, without any of that background and that complex, you know, help from the experts understanding that. So that's definitely changed. I mean, I think, you know, just the fact that people get their news from different sources. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are not political friends who all get their news from the Squiz, you know, every day. They listen to the podcast when they're having their breakfast or in the car on the way to work. So, you know, there's just so many different ways that people are getting their news now. So you just have to, you know, be prepared to jump, as Tony says, wherever you can get some space.
Absolutely. And you talked a lot about, obviously, the complexity of the information that the RBA is dealing with and how that's communicated, but it's also, you know, the volume of what you're dealing with. So the RBA and the governor would be, you know, one of the most quoted institutions in the country, Sal. How do you deal with misinformation and where things go wrong, you know, spotting it and correcting it? And that must be a real challenge for you and your team.
Thankfully, I know she is quoted a lot, but she doesn't speak a lot, certainly compared to a politician. So it is quite easy to get them to say, hang on a minute, it's right there. And obviously because we are very conscious of making sure that everybody has access to what she says all the time, there's always reams of, you know, transcripts and material for people to go back to. So correcting misquoting is not hard. What is difficult is, you know, we have had, and I'm sure people, CEOs in here have had information, you know, misinformation on Facebook in particular, which we have, you know, had shocking examples of real life videos of Michelle, like at a conference like this. It's her voice, and it looks like she's giving an interview on how great crypto is. And it is just, it's incredible. And of course, you don't know it's there unless someone tells you. So there's now, of course, a lot of products that you can use, you know, to help you sort of scrape these different social platforms so you can find, you know, where your boss is being spoken about, and you can check if it is actually her voice and she is saying what she had been saying. But, you know, it's causing huge issues in the central banking world. There's a big focus on it at central banks about how we actually make sure that we are challenging this, because, you know, a lot of those investment scams are using, you know, like central bank voices to sell that sort of rubbish. So it's a real problem.
We see it in banking all the time, whether it's deep fakes using, you know, central bank governors or celebrities, particularly as it relates to investment scams, which is my segue into you, Megan. So misinformation presents itself in many different ways across different industries. Talk us through what it means for you at ING and how you deal to it.
Yeah, look, it can present itself, as you say, in different ways. I think probably one of the most common ones that we've just touched on there is impersonation scams. So, you know, someone pretending to be our brand and flogging fake products to customers. It can also present itself in, you know, scammers pretending to be ING staff. I think I myself, I've been a victim to that before. I think for us, it's really about being prepared, but then testing your preparedness. So, you know, do you have the right mechanics in place to spot it? That in itself can be quite challenging. Does everyone across the team, so we're a big bank, we've got more than 2,500 staff now, not quite as big as Westpac, obviously. But, you know, if someone in our contact centre spots something that doesn't seem quite right, do they know what to do with that information? How do they escalate it up? So you've got to make sure you have those processes. You also need to have like a rapid response team, which is really where your corporate affairs team should be stepping in, because they're going to be able to, review the information, know pretty imminently whether it's fake or not. And working with your cybersecurity and your fraud teams, they've got some, magic tools where they can pull down fake information in some scenarios.
We need some of those tools.
Yeah. I'll put you in touch with them.
And say, please take that down.
Oh, don't worry, we
Yeah.
also ring Meta as well, Sal.
It takes a long time.
We've done that, and
Yeah.
it's often not as quick as you'd like.
No.
And then it's putting it through the test. So all banks have simulation exercises. I'm sure many of you have probably sat in rooms where there's a cyber attack or something along those lines, and you've got your executive committee and your crisis management team going through it. And then there's always like a, oh, we've just heard from news.com.au. For us, we actually feed in deep fakes, we feed in fake information, we have someone from the contact centre call in the room to say someone's just called, they're saying that Melanie's here or she's there when she's not. So I think you've got to put that process itself to the test and make sure, the right people across the business know how to do it.
Yeah, it's about building that muscle memory, so when the real crisis happens, you can just swing into action. Yeah. Tony, keen, a couple of questions for you, and everyone in the room, we will have time, I hope, for some audience questions. So a couple of last questions for Tony, and then I'll throw to the room. But Tony, talk me through in your work, do you spot the impact of misinformation in the work and the polling that you do? Do you think it's already skewing public opinion? I'm sure it is in many ways.
Yeah, so we do a lot of focus groups where you just allow people to talk, and there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of misperceptions that people just are absolutely sure it's true, and it's really hard to counter it. And and everyone will know that people are in much smaller media groups these days, and because Facebook feeds them what they want to hear, and Instagram feeds them what.
That
it just
echo
gets
chamber, isn't it?
echo chamber. And they've just become more persistent as well. It is really hard to turn around some perceptions. I know with banking, we still get all the time. And it plays to brand prejudice as well, and prejudice against industries and things like that. But they will always say, oh, look, when the interest rates go up, the banks, they'll raise the interest rates on your mortgage straight away. When they go down, they're really slow in dropping. And that just hasn't been true for a long time. But if someone brings that up in a focus group, everyone else in the focus group will go, yeah, that's terrible. They're typical of those bastards, that's what they do. So you see loads of misperceptions in focus groups in the public, for sure.
Yeah, and Megan, you touched on the corporate affairs team spots whether something's fake or not, but not everybody has that skill. And given the authenticity and as Sal mentioned, deep fakes of the governor, given how real some of these things can be, Tony, keen to get your thoughts on media literacy and the role of all organisations, but including banks, given that we're at an ABA conference today, in helping to build people's media literacy in organisations so that they can help to spot misinformation and disinformation.
Helping.
How do we help our people and companies to do this more broadly, do you think, and build that literacy? It's hard.
It's hard because it's so diverse now.
Yeah.
It's not just it's not just newspapers and TV. It's not just 6 o'clock news at night. It's so many different things. But I think you've just got to get those fundamentals right. It's interesting how often this stuff plays to prejudice and prejudices that people have in their minds. And that will have built up over time. So a prejudice against banks, or a prejudice against Qantas, or a prejudice against a certain politician. If you can get that, it comes back to that thing I was saying before about living the brand. At least you're in a better place where you might have a chance of getting that right. But there is so much to be across. But you've got experts here who are across that stuff, and it's really important these days, for sure.
Agree, and I think we have a lot to learn from how other markets are dealing to it. So if you look at Finland, they have media literacy and digital literacy now built into their school curriculum from primary school age, and I think that's when you need to start talking to people, because these kids are engaging with all these different platforms. That's where a lot of this misinformation lies. It's important we get in early and start teaching people.
the old kind of people of authority don't exist anymore.
Yes.
People of authority can be some bloke on Instagram
Yes.
telling me what I should take creatine, and telling my teenage
Does
son
it work? Will it help?
Well, my teenage son believes it works. He certainly believes it. And they're not doctors or anything. It's amazing what they hear, but that is their source of authority, and
I
they
know,
absolutely
it's scary,
believe
isn't it? It really is. All right, some time for some questions from the audience. Any burning questions for our panel?
Let me jump in while the audience work
Thanks,
up the
Adam.
courage. First of all, Tony, loving your work on the creatine. You are looking fantastic. More a comment that I'd love to get you to respond to, anyone on the panel who wants it. So my daughter, proud dad vibes, 20 years old, University of Sydney, studying politics and international relations, pulling down HDs in the subject, so an informed person who knows what's going on. I'm confident she has never in her life watched the 7 p.m. news. I genuinely cannot recall in my life, and she is totally, it's just not the way she does it. So when we giggle a little bit at the thought of the RBA governor on TikTok, I'm willing to bet anyone in the room who wants it $100 within 5 years that'll happen.
Oh, sure. If I'm still there, it'll be shorter than 5. But I mean, yeah, that is actually true. I mean, the point is, I guess, we're not politicians, so, and you guys are trying to get customers and talk to customers. Our job is to try to explain to people how the one blunt instrument that we have affects their lives, and we really take that seriously, and we want to explain that to people. So it's really our job, to find out, where those people are and go and find them and explain to them how what we do impacts their lives and affects their lives. So we absolutely have to, find where somebody like that lives, and it is on social media or it is listening to podcasts. I mean, there's a huge take-up of podcasts now. So yeah, it's really our responsibility to, certainly from a public service perspective, which we see ourselves as to finding those people and telling them.
And Tony, can I say, I don't know if you followed closely the New York mayoral primary in the States, but you had Zoran Mamdani, and he's up against Andrew Cuomo, the old guy who got, had some corruption issues hanging over him and all. But Cuomo had 14 times the budget, and Mamdani's quite comfortably saying, I'm pretty much a socialist and I'm going to get government-sponsored groceries. But he just got out amongst people and he just filmed these videos where he was just talking to people on the street. And they clearly weren't stooges who were already voting. He was just talking to regular people, some of whom disagreed with him vehemently, and he still put it out there. And he just had these genuine conversations with people. And people said that's what cut through in an electorate where...
I think that's really critical. Like, you can get carried away about, having all the sources and reaching people and all of that kind of stuff. But just because it's on TV doesn't mean people watch it. Just because it's on the radio, just because it appears in their feed doesn't mean people will engage in it. So the stuff that Sal's talking about understanding people and finding points of empathy that they, communication is still emotional. And a lot of, it's not about just putting out a press release, or it's finding the right words and finding what the element that people really care about and will really engage. Because, just because it's on TV or on YouTube doesn't mean people will engage with it at all.
Questions or comments for our panel on this fascinating discussion of navigating disruption across multiple channels? What do we want to ask at the back there?
Hello, my name's Stacey Edmonds. How are you? Creator of Dodgy or Not.
Oh.
I know, you may have seen us outside. We teach people how to not get scammed. Full-on game, dodgy or not. There you go, see? Made you laugh. That's the point. If you're laughing, you're learning. I'm really fascinated by your conversation about education. Obviously, I'm a teacher by trade. We've spent years having conversations around the 14 government websites that all have the same information. The Department of Education isn't stepping in. We're saying banks then, or who is going to upskill our next generation and our current generation on how to know what social engineering is, what critical thinking is, and how does that apply in the land where, I grew up with the BBC. Welcome to the BBC. Okay. So I've heard you say that, should banks be stepping in more to help our customers and help our people and help our young people understand and be able to recognise the imposter syndrome, to recognise the social engineering that actually is happening on a daily basis. What's your opinion on that? Do you think the bank should take the lead, that the government should take the lead, the Department of Education should take the lead, that someone?
How about parents?
How about parents?
That's a great idea.
Great answer,
You
Sal.
guys had them. Do something with them.
The biggest challenge,
Whoa! Is that the RBA's official position
No,
on?
just mine, just mine.
the biggest challenge is
I
parents
mean,
don't know
I was
either.
actually listening this morning on Radio National to a lady who was talking about financial literacy, actually, and how she was excellent. I can't remember where she was from, but it'll come to me in a minute. And she was talking about, putting it into curriculum and having to teach, because obviously there's no cash anymore. I mean, I remember, as a little girl, you used to get the cash machine and the shopping trolley, and that's how you learnt how to, buy things, because you got the coins and the cash. That doesn't happen anymore, of course, because no kid's ever seen coin or cash. So, how you actually teach financial literacy. And I mean, the poor school curriculum, it is just full of so much stuff. They're only there for such a short amount of time. We have to come up with other ways, of teaching kids this, the way the world is now. And I think parents have to take a responsibility in that, and teaching them to understand what is and isn't right. I mean, you hear all these horrific stories about, social media and its impact that it has on people's well-being. I mean, it is, we have to get involved with what our kids are looking at, and, and how we can help to make them understand what is right and wrong. Says the girl that doesn't have children, but carry on.
I hope so.
I think, and just to add to what Sal said, parents, I agree, Sal, are incredibly important. And I think it's a collective effort right across the ecosystem. And it comes down to the role of the industry that you work in, and where is your bailiwick and where can you add the most value. So from a banking perspective, I can speak on behalf of Westpac. We spend an incredible amount of time educating customers on scams. We run fraud and scams education sessions in our branches. We do a lot of work online. We obviously have coaching conversations in the moment when we think a customer is being scammed, and we try to explain that to them. So we take every opportunity at every interaction to help to educate, but I do think it's a huge problem, and I think it'll be a collective effort across both government and the private sector.
And can I just say, remember the Dolomites?
Oh, yeah.
I know this is like against the law now, but I don't work in banking per se, so I'm allowed to say it. But when people, who shall remain nameless, got rid of the Dolomites from the schools, that's a huge silliness. I get it. I don't care if they were Dolomites or Westpac mites or ING mites. I don't care who the bank was that was, selling it. But, putting that $1 in each week, really helped you to understand about building, your bank account. I know that meant they were all becoming Commonwealth Bank customers, and bad for the people sitting up here. But the point is, it actually was important, and it brought finance into the school. And, you used to want to bring your $1 along to school to put it in your Dolomite account so you could see it grow. So I actually think that was a stupid idea of the people who shall remain nameless who got rid of it.
Stable coins in schools. That's what we need. Get the kids onto the stable coins. Microphone down the front, over to that table over there. You've got something to say, then down the front here as well. What would you like to ask?
Thank you. I just wanted to say, so Tony, one of your points that you made was that you should be the brand and that customers really value authenticity. We have Emily being the brand in Westpac Red today. Well done.
Thanks, Elle.
All good. I just wanted to check, from your perspective, acknowledging that banking products are becoming, more and more homogenised, regulations bringing banks closer together more than ever before. What are your thoughts on brand for banks and how they can distinguish from each other, from the consumer's
It's really interesting. So we do a lot of stuff for the banking industry, and when you talk about the Australian banking industry, and if you think of that as a brand, and you go into focus groups and you ask about the banking industry, quite often you'll get some negativity and stuff about they put profits first, and they're kind of distant and faceless and all of that kind of stuff. But quite often people have a very different relationship with their individual bank. So they'll look at the industry a certain way, but they'll look at their individual bank, and it will have separate brand values, and they might have quite a good relationship with that. So I think brand as an industry matters, but I think it also matters and actually works, and we see that at a individual level. So you might get someone who loves that they're with ING and not part of the mainstream and all of that, and they really relate to that, and that's very sort of separate sorts of values and a different sort of relationship that they'll have with that brand than the industry as a whole.
Thank you.
Down the front here.
Thank you. Such an interesting conversation. I could sit here and listen to you all afternoon. But a question for you, Megan. I've watched ING for a long time, and you've always had such a great personal brand. You, I think, have the most incredible NPS of any bank, if you still do. You did for a long time. And I'm just interested in your perspective on how do you maintain that as you get bigger as a bank, and as you start to have more touch points, more people. You know, how do you make sure that that continues to flow through everything that you do, and make sure that your people really believe it? I think you talked about the 3 kind of key focus areas, but yeah, just interested in if you can expand on that.
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I was saying earlier about that, like kind of that philosophy of a challenger brand. For us, it's about being different, being relevant, and keeping things simple. And, you know, if you watch our ads, if you use our products, if you look at how, you know, we talk to the media, if you look at like our newsroom, our socials, it's very much reflected through that. And from a bank strategy perspective as well, when you, like the whole business is informed on that, and it's very much led with those principles. And it has, like I've been there for 8 years and it's been the case, and it's, you know, been the case for the 25 years that we've been in market.
There's a media report, I think at the beginning of this week or end of last week, about lowering the voting age in the UK to 16. I've got teenage kids, and that kind of, it's a little scary thinking about 18-year-olds voting, let alone 16-year-olds. My question for you is, raising the point that you identified earlier about younger people and how they get their news. If you look forward in 10 years' time, both in the way that the RBA communicates with people and the way that banks communicate and the way that people are communicating politically, what's going to be different with this generation being 10 years older? And how do you see, you know, attracting customers or political votes or explaining, you know, issues that a central bank is dealing with to a generation that is consuming news and information very differently?
I mean, it sounds trite, but I do think Tony's right. Authenticity is so key. I mean, literally, Michelle is the best governor from Central casting. Like, she's so authentic. People say to me, "Oh my God, you've done an amazing job with her," and I'm like, I didn't do anything. She's so incredible. She's just, she doesn't need to be the smartest person in the room, which I'm not sure about you, but that seems to be the go with a room full of economists. And she's very happy to tell you in her own, you know, in a very simple way, you know, what something means, and make something very complex very simple. And she doesn't think it makes her, you know, less smart, and she doesn't think the person asking her is less smart than her. So, and you know, that authenticity is just so important. And when you're flicking through hundreds and hundreds of shit on social media, if you grab someone who you can see is talking to you authentically, you're going to be streets ahead, and you can't teach it. I mean, imagine Michelle Bullock's authenticity in some of those clowns in Canberra. I mean, it'd be amazing. I've tried it myself. You can't teach it down there.
Chris, when I started doing political research, basically 40% of people always voted Labor, approximately. 40% of people always voted Labor, 40% of people always voted Coalition, 20% were swinging voters. And the only people we were interested in was the swinging voters. And now it's basically doubled. So 40% of people are swinging voters. Now that hasn't come about because of you know, the way the media world has changed and the advent of, you know, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all of that kind of stuff. It's come about from, you know, it's about trust and not trusting politicians anymore and things like that. It's more about those fundamentals than a change in the media landscape that has brought that about. But it's really hard to predict what it will be like in 10 years from now, but and where people will get their information. But you imagine that fickleness amongst voters will just keep growing, I think, unless there's a change in the fundamentals.
And I think our jobs are going to get harder because of it. Any other final? One over here. Thank you.
Thank you for the fabulous conversation at 4 o'clock on day 2. My question is about a comment made by a panellist, and I can't recall who exactly it was. They mentioned that trust in traditional media in Australia is quite high. And I was wondering what distinguishes Australia, or perhaps the media, from what we're seeing in the US?
Melanie or Sal, was that you? I think it was you, Melanie.
I think it was me.
Yes, it
that
was.
said that. Yeah. So yeah, trust has remained pretty resilient for the last decade. It's a really good question, and it's gone up 3% in the last year.
Compulsory voting would have a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
No Fox News, although Free Sky News in regional Australia is a terrible step if you want my personal non-RBA opinion. Having it for free on regional TV, I think, is bad. But having, if you look at Sky News compared to Fox News and its difference in audience numbers, I think that has, had a real difference to the trust level.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it means the media's not doing crazy things to get out the vote, nor are politicians. I mean, I think compulsory voting is the unsung hero of our democracy. I mean, we should all be celebrating it every single day. It is such a gift that we have. And it makes people, if they're smart, let's not talk about the last election, but talk to the middle. That's where everybody lives, mainly. You've got to talk to the middle.
All yours to wrap up.
I think it's a wrap then. So thank you so much. This has been a fantastic chat. We've talked a lot about media today. So again, one quick rapid fire response to close us out. Who's your favourite journalist or commentator? And I don't know if James Ayres is still in the room, but somebody should say James Ayres if he's still here.
AFR.
Tony.
I like
Go.
Laura Tingle.
Laura Tingle, okay, popular favourite.
I was going to say that too.
You can say it. We all love Laura.
Yeah,
Laura?
yeah.
And Megan, what about you?
I quite like what Joyce Malakis is doing at the moment at the AFR. I think she's been taking some interesting angles and observations, so yeah.
Brilliant. Great wrap. Thank you, everyone, and great to be with you here today. And thank you to our panel. Thanks, Adam.
And thank you very much, Emily, for steering the good ship.